Picture yourself in a dim corner of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, on a quiet evening in 1933. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead. The aroma of freshly brewed Starbucks coffee lingers. And across from you sits a grizzled veteran, his silver hair stark against eyes, sharp as a blade. He doesn't spin tales of heroic battles in Normandy or airstrikes over the Pacific. No, his story is darker, colder, like a winter gust through the Ardennes forest. This is a tale of men once called doctors, whose actions make you question if they were human at all. Welcome to the first chapter of the story of the depraved doctors of the Third Reich. A story not for the faint of heart. After World War I, Germany was like a battered Humvee shot up in an Iraqi desert, limping on three wheels, engine wheezing, fuel tank dry. The Treaty of Versailles, signed with the smug satisfaction of the victors, crushed Germany like a 1,000-ton boulder. Forced to pay crippling reparations, the German mark became worthless, not even fit for a Big Mac. Berlin's streets brimmed with hunger. Gaunt children shivered in icy alleys, and soldiers who'd bled in Flanders trenches met only hollow stares from those they'd fought for. Their sacrifices, the endless nights in mud and gunfire, seemed a cruel jest of fate. In this desperation, a toxic whisper spread, an invisible plague from one mind to the next. Germany didn't lose on the battlefield, they said. No, defeat came from within, from traitors who stabbed the nation in the back. Jews, communists, anyone deemed different was scapegoated. It was a brazen lie, no more credible than Bigfoot rumors at Area 51. But in a broken nation, truth was often strangled by resentment. The lie was a spark, smoldering in the hearts of the people, waiting to ignite a wildfire that would consume all. From the ashes of a shattered Germany, a man stepped from the shadows, promising light. Let's call him Jake Miller, a name as familiar as a Texas high school buddy. But this man was Adolf Hitler's embodiment. Jake wasn't the guy you'd invite to a weekend barbecue. With a voice as hypnotic as an 80s rock anthem and eyes cold as steel, he seemed to peer into souls. He vowed to restore Germany's glory, to resurrect the pride trampled under Versailles' boot. His words were a sedative for a nation craving hope, and soon Germans believed he was their guide. In 1933, Jake and his party, the Nazis, a name like a secret society from a Hollywood flick, seized control of Germany. They didn't just take political power, they claimed the nation's mind and soul. Newspapers, radios, books, even children's toys were twisted to serve Jake's ideology. Ever thought a Barbie doll could be propaganda? In Nazi Germany, it wasn't fantasy. Anything clashing with Jake's vision was erased. Books were tossed into flames during public burnings. The fires, a warning seared into minds. Disobey, and you'll burn next. Those flames weren't just destruction. They were a macabre ritual, marking the birth of a new Germany, one manipulated by fear and blind loyalty. Jake didn't just want to control the present. He aimed to shape the future. Children were taught that patriotism meant obeying every order, that outsiders were threats to be eliminated. Nazi rallies with blazing red flags and frenzied speeches felt like an Alabama Crimson Tide home game. But instead of cheering teamwork, they roared for hatred. Behind it all, Jake and his followers sowed a myth. Germans were descendants of a supreme race, the mythical Aryans, strong and pure like Marvel superheroes. But to achieve this greatness, they needed to purge what they deemed impurities, starting with the Jews. the seeds of racism were planted, soon sprouting into horrors beyond anyone's imagination. This story, a long road into darkness, is just beginning. From the ruins of a broken Germany, Jake Miller built a war machine aimed not just at other nations, but at his own people. What followed, brutal medical experiments, concentration camps, and the corruption of once doctors, will make you wonder what turns humans into monsters. Brace yourself, for this path leads into history's darkest corners, where hope's light seems utterly extinguished. From the ashes of a shattered Germany, Jake Miller didn't just build a regime. He crafted a new religion, a warped creed worshipping fanaticism and division. Imagine you're in a Fort Bragg bar, sipping a frosty Budweiser, listening to a grizzled veteran weave this tale. His eyes are heavy, as if ghosts of the past flicker in the cigarette smoke. This isn't a story of gunfire or trenches, but of how one man used words and false beliefs to turn a nation into puppets. Jake Miller wasn't just a politician. He was a zealot, a prophet of darkness, and his book, My Struggle, was the Bible of the nightmare to come. In My Struggle, Jake painted a world starkly divided, like a Hollywood blockbuster splitting good from evil. At humanity's pinnacle, he claimed, were the Aryans, blonde, blue-eyed Germans, strong as Alabama Crimson Tide linebackers, ready to bulldoze any opponent on the field. Jake preached that Aryans weren't ordinary Germans. They were descendants of a superior race, heirs to the mythical Atlantis, a cradle of ancient superhumans, if you bought his tale. But this greatness, he ranted, had been tainted over centuries by mixing with inferior races, Jews, Slavs, anyone who didn't fit his perfect picture. It was like a bad Star Wars script, but instead of Jedi versus Sith, you had Aryans against those cast as vile enemies. The catch? No shred of science backed Jake's story. His Aryan myth was as baseless as believing Bigfoot descended from Area 51 aliens, a wild fantasy, alive only in the minds of fanatics. But Jake didn't need real science. He wielded a stronger weapon, the crowd's belief. With a voice as mesmerizing as a razor's edge and eyes sharp as a blade, he turned this fable into national truth, embedding it in German minds like an anthem's lyrics. Jake's propaganda spread like an unstoppable virus. Children's books, films, radio, all became tools to cram in his ideology. German kids who should have been kicking balls in the streets sat in classrooms learning that Jews were enemies, the cause of their parents' joblessness, the reason a burger cost a fortune. It was like memorizing multiplication tables, but instead of math, they learned hate. Fairy tales no longer featured princes and princesses. They glorified Aryan supremacy and the danger of outsiders. Can you imagine? A generation raised to believe division was natural, that some were born to rule, others to be erased. To make this dark dream reality, Jake needed a master manipulator, and he found one in Mike Thompson, our name for Joseph Goebbels, but picture him as a Hollywood director turning lies into masterpieces. Mike ran the propaganda ministry, a machine as smooth as a '69 Mustang. Under his hand, every street corner, radio wave, and book page echoed Jake's message. He convinced Germans that Jews weren't just a threat, but the root of all misery, from unemployment to the price of a Starbucks coffee. Mike didn't just tell stories. He crafted a world where Jews were the common enemy, a specter to be destroyed for Germany to rise. Under Mike's lead, Germany became a propaganda juggernaut, making Super Bowl ad campaigns look amateur. Posters on streets, songs on radios, movies in theaters, all hailed Aryans and vilified Jews. Nazi rallies with blazing red flags and flickering torches felt like a frenzied rock concert. But instead of music, they sang of domination and hate. Germans, from farmers to workers, children to elders, were swept into this maelstrom, convinced the only path to glory was purging what didn't belong. But this wasn't just about words and posters. The seeds Jake and Mike sowed were sprouting, priming a harvest of horrors. The Aryan myth, though fabricated, became the compass for brutal policies, from anti-Jewish laws to medical experiments that would chill your blood. Mike's propaganda machine didn't just change minds, it paved the way for acts beyond humanity's boundaries. When you think the darkness can't get thicker, brace yourself, because this story is about to plunge into corners where humans become monsters and science becomes a nightmare's tool. Step out of the dim glow of the Fort Bragg bar, where Jake Miller's propaganda machine still echoes. Now, enter a German hospital in 1935, where cold white light from dangling bulbs bathes gray brick walls. You'd expect devoted doctors, white-coated heroes bent over beds, saving anguished souls. But no, this is no place of healing. It's a dark chapter from a Stephen King novel, where those once called doctors morph into monsters, their syringes weapons of darkness. This is the story of the Third Reich's depraved doctors who sold their souls to a vile ideology. Germany once prided itself on its medical prowess, its doctors revered like superstars, akin to MIT scientists or Johns Hopkins surgeons. They were pioneers, brilliant minds admired globally. But under the Nazi ideology's shadow, they began to change. Like Humvees rusting in a desert, their souls corroded under the allure of power, fame, and a misguided belief in improving humanity. Jake Miller's ideology, with its Aryan myth and pseudoscience, didn't just infiltrate schools or radios. It seeped into hospitals' sterile rooms where life was meant to be preserved. Sarah Carter, our name for a fictional doctor representing thousands of Nazi physicians, embodies this corruption. Picture Sarah as a med school friend, blonde hair neatly tied, sharp eyes, and a smile that made you believe she was born to save lives. She once swore the Hippocratic Oath, vowing to prioritize patients. But now, in the hospital's icy corridors, Sarah wields a syringe with hollow eyes, as if her soul has been drained. She and her colleagues no longer heal. They conduct inhumane experiments, turning human bodies into tools for a warped dream of Aryan purity. In 1939, the T4 program launched, marking a peak of brutality. Masked as euthanasia, it targeted the disabled, the ill, anyone deemed unfit for Aryan blood. Imagine a child, eyes innocent to the world, left in freezing cold, their tiny bodies shivering until hypothermia stole their final breath. Or a patient overdosed with sedatives, a nurse stroking their hair, whispering, "Don't be afraid, it won't hurt." Words meant to comfort became a lullaby to death. Hospitals sent condolence letters to families, weaving lies of natural causes. But the truth, like black smoke curling from crematoria, couldn't stay hidden forever. Gray-windowed buses rolled silently through towns, carrying the disabled to fates no one dared name. Locals whispered of cries from hospitals, of acrid smoke in the air, but fear, like a noose, silenced dissent. Who would speak out when Nazi flags flew on every corner, when neighbors' glances could turn to accusations? Silence reigned, and in that silence, darkness grew. What drove doctors like Sarah Carter to betray their ethics? Partly ambition, the chance to climb ranks in a regime that rewarded cruelty. Partly blind faith in Nazi pseudoscience, believing they were forging a better future. But something deeper, almost supernatural, seemed at play, as if Jake Miller's ideology turned them into puppets of a darker force. Some stories claimed that in frigid laboratories, the eyes of doctors like Sarah flashed an eerie red, as if they were no longer themselves. Were these the hallucinations of desperate victims, or was something otherworldly manipulating them? No one knew, but their cruelty surpassed what ordinary humans could do. This story, A Road to Hell, is just beginning. The T4 program was only the first step, a horrific prelude to what lay ahead. Concentration camps, gas chambers, and experiments that freeze your blood. Doctors like Sarah Carter, once symbols of hope, became nightmares incarnate. As you think of them, ask, what could make someone abandon their humanity? And in their shoes, could you resist the darkness, or would it swallow you? The answer, like crematorium smoke, lingers, awaiting us in the chapters to come. Imagine standing in a desolate North Carolina field, not far from Fort Bragg, where tales of war and darkness are still whispered around campfires. A cold wind cuts through the evening chill of 2025, and a grizzled veteran, his face etched like the war-torn roads he's traveled, continues the story. His voice is low, each word heavy with memory. We've journeyed through a broken Germany, where Jake Miller sowed seeds of hatred, and hospitals where doctors like Sarah Carter turned monstrous. Now, the darkness deepens, grows more profound, as the tale takes us to 1941, a time when humanity was erased and concentration camps became tombs for the living. This is the chapter of dehumanization, where people were stripped of everything, even the right to be called human. By 1941, Jake Miller and his Nazi party no longer hid their sinister ambitions. They called it the final solution, a term sounding like a Pentagon strategy, but in truth, a death sentence for millions of Jews. Jews, once neighbors, friends, or even comrades in World War I, were stripped of basic rights. They were erased from society as if they'd never existed. Laws banned them from marrying Germans, stole their citizenship, and herded them into filthy ghettos where disease and hunger were their only companions. Streets once alive with laughter now echoed with moans and the specter of despair. Jews were isolated, forgotten, like a ghost town in a Hollywood horror flick, a place no one dared enter. But Jake Miller's cruelty didn't stop there. From the ghettos, Jews were forced onto frigid, overcrowded trains, bound for concentration camps. Names like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Buchenwald, now cursed echoes in history. These weren't prisons. They were the devil's laboratories, where life was dissected and humanity crushed. Within gray walls, under the dim glow of dangling bulbs, doctors like Sarah Carter held the power of life and death. They stood in blood-stained white coats, deciding who lived, who died, and who became lab rats for horrific experiments. No compassion, no hesitation, just the cold precision of machines programmed by Nazi ideology. Prisoners in the camps endured experiments beyond the darkest imagination. Some were exposed to bone-chilling cold, their bodies trembling until their hearts stopped, while doctors took notes as if testing a jeep in a Nevada desert. Others were injected with deadly bacteria, their bodies battlegrounds for disease, as Sarah and her colleagues watched, quills scratching paper like scripting a horror film. Some victims were dismembered without anesthesia, their screams piercing the night, echoing through icy stone walls. To the doctors, these weren't people. They were specimens, tools for a warped dream of Aryan supremacy. Strangest, and perhaps most terrifying, were the whispers among surviving prisoners. Some swore that in the dark laboratories, Sarah Carter's eyes flashed an eerie red, as if no longer human. Others claimed to hear sourceless murmurs in the shadows, as if a supernatural force guided these doctors. Were these hallucinations born of hunger, pain, and abject fear? Or was something darker, an unseen specter, manipulating those who'd forsaken their humanity? No one knew, but the stories made you wonder, could humans alone be so brutal, or were they led by something beyond comprehension? This dehumanization wasn't just the work of doctors or guards. It was the product of a machine built by Jake Miller and the Nazis. A machine that turned ordinary people into accomplices through action or silence. Jews were stripped of names, histories, and dignity, reduced to numbers tattooed on arms, like barcodes on Amazon packages. Those who'd shared meals or fought side by side in trenches were now seen as enemies, as things to be erased for Germany to shine. In the camp's darkness, where cries blended with cold winds, humanity seemed left behind. This story, like a nightmare without end, isn't over. What happened in the camps was only part of a larger plan, one that would make even Fort Bragg's toughest shudder. As we move forward, brace for darker chapters, where millions were erased, and the question of human nature becomes an unsolvable mystery. Were Sarah Carter and her ilk monsters, or humans swallowed by darkness? The answer, like red eyes flashing in the night, lurks somewhere, waiting for us to uncover. Picture yourself in a tent at Fort Bragg. The campfires flicker, illuminating the faces of soldiers around you. An old veteran, his voice rumbling like a Humvee's engine, continues the tale of the Third Reich's darkness. Smoke from his cigarette curls upward, mingling with memories of a time when humanity was buried in ash. We've traversed hospitals where doctors turned monstrous, concentration camps where screams blended with cold winds. Now the story shifts to a more painful chapter, the cost of silence, when millions became victims and those who knew the truth turned away. This is the tale of what happens when humanity lets darkness triumph without a word. From 1933 to 1945, Jake Miller's Germany became a soulless killing machine. About 400,000 Germans deemed unworthy by warped Aryan standards were sterilized, their bodies robbed of parenthood in frigid operating rooms. The T4 program, euphemistically called euthanasia, claimed 200,000 disabled lives. Children, elders, once loved souls now labeled burdens. And in camps like Auschwitz and Dachau, millions of Jews were erased, their names vanishing like smoke from crematoria into gray skies. Doctors and nurses, trained to heal, became executioners, hands bloodied but minds calm. They justified it as protecting the nation or serving science. But the cold truth was harsher. They'd sold their souls to a malevolent ideology, a darkness that devoured all light. Yet more terrifying than the numbers or atrocities was the silence of those who remained. Many Germans knew what was happening. They saw black smoke coiling from crematoria, heard train wheels grinding in the night, carrying people who'd never return. They whispered of gray-windowed buses, of hospitals where children's cries abruptly stopped. But fear, like barbed wire, bound them. Fear of arrest, of betrayal, or simply of facing the horrific truth kept them mute. Some were brainwashed by propaganda, believing Jews or the disabled were enemies. Others were apathetic, like scrolling past a grim news headline and thinking, "Not my problem." Whatever the reason, their silence let the darkness spread, like a storm swallowing a continent. This story isn't just history. It's a mirror, forcing us to confront ourselves. Imagine you're a soldier at Fort Bragg, sipping Starbucks, hearing rumors of a secret lab at Area 51 conducting horrific experiments. What would you do? Stay silent, pretend you didn't hear, or seek the truth, even if it costs everything? That's the question millions of Germans faced in those dark years, and most chose wrong. Their silence wasn't just passive, it was complicity, a brick in the road to hell. When the war ended, the light of justice flickered through the Nuremberg trials, exposing Nazi crimes. But the cost of silence lingered, a scar on humanity's body that never heals. Millions died, not just because of those wielding knives, but because others chose not to speak. This story, a warning etched into history, reminds us that darkness doesn't arise alone. It grows when we let it. As our journey continues, brace for the final mysteries. Were those doctors monsters or humans manipulated? The answer, like crematorium smoke, hovers somewhere awaiting our search. Imagine you're in a small suburban American theater, the dim screen casting shadows on rapt faces. Saving Private Ryan has just ended, but the story an old veteran begins in the darkness chills your heart. His voice is low, like waves crashing on Omaha Beach, carrying memories of a time when humanity touched the abyss. We've traveled the Third Reich's painful roads, from a broken Germany, through hospitals where doctors became monsters, to camps where cries mingled with crematoria smoke. But now, as World War II ends, the story doesn't wrap like a Hollywood film with a tidy resolution. It leaves a haunting mystery like a specter lurking in fog, making you wonder, has that darkness truly vanished? When World War II ended in 1945, justice's light pierced through the Nuremberg trials. In cold courtrooms, the world saw the Nazi doctors' brutality. Figures like Sarah Carter, who turned syringes into weapons and labs into tombs. Evidence was laid bare. Meticulous logs of horrific experiments, photos of victims with hollow eyes, and testimonies that made even seasoned judges shudder. Some doctors faced the gallows or prison walls, but many, like phantoms in a storm, vanished without a trace. They fled, blending into the chaos of refugees or hiding under false names in the world's forgotten corners. Rumors spread like campfire tales at Fort Bragg. Whispers claimed some Nazi doctors continued their ghastly work in far-off places beyond justice's reach. Some spoke of hideouts in the Amazon, where strange bird calls mixed with the hum of secret labs. Others mentioned underground bases in Antarctica, where ice concealed experiments defying imagination. Were these mere myths, like Bigfoot or Area 51 UFOs? Or was something darker, a remnant of Nazi evil, still lurking in the world's shadows? No one knew, but the thought alone could make you shiver while biting into a Five Guys burger, wondering if history had truly closed. The tale of the Third Reich's depraved doctors isn't just a history chapter. It's a warning carved into humanity's conscience, a scar that never heals. It reminds us that humans, no matter how brilliant, can become monsters when they lose their humanity. The darkness Jake Miller unleashed never truly vanished. It retreated to hidden corners, waiting for a chance to rise. Next time you watch Saving Private Ryan or drive the dusty roads near a military base, consider this. Brutality doesn't need guns to thrive. It grows in silence, in apathy, in the moments we choose not to face the truth. This story is a call not just to remember the past, but to act in the present. If it unnerves or provokes you, spread it. Share it with friends and family in America to keep the flame of truth and courage burning. Ask yourself, were those doctors monsters or humans manipulated by ideology? Your answer, like a campfire's glow, can light the path ahead. As you leave this theater carrying this story, remember, darkness is always there, but the light of truth is stronger if we dare to hold it.